Ladies and gents, let's start off with our afternoon session. And it's a great privilege to announce Advocate Les Kugel. He will be the facilitator, also the chairperson of ICCSP, and Dr. Rambuli, and also Vanessa Moodley. We also have Monique Vlok, Rod Bell, and Jonathan Mudzunga. It's great to have the panel with us. Let's give them a warm welcome. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for making the time to listen to us. I know, a part of what we're going to say, a lot of what we're going to say centers around legislation, regulation, and matters like that. So it could be sometimes perceived to be quite intimidating, and for that we've got a panel here today that's going to look a bit into the future in terms of biosecurity and sustainability. So what are we looking at, going into the future? What are going to be the challenges? What are the sort of things we need to be looking at? So what are the different perspectives? So I'm very happy to announce that we've got what I believe, quite a prominent panel here. And Vanessa here sitting second from my, sorry, it's David. He's standing in for Vanessa. So David, welcome here. But firstly, I think Dr. Maanda Rambuli is also a member on the ICCSP from the Department of Agriculture. He's going to give us a bit of government's perspective around plant health. Then we've got David there. David is going to look into innovations, what is happening from the industry side on that side. Monique sitting next to him, she's the farmer. So at the end of the day, we can hear what government has to say, we can hear what sort of the official industry side is, but at the end of the day, what matters is what does the farmer think, and how does that impact on the farmer at ground level. Then we've got Rod Bell there from CropLife. I think you probably all know Rod, but he's also an expert on pesticides, implications, what does that mean for crops. And then last but certainly not least, the gentleman sitting there in the corner looking, like a teacher, a very strict one, is Jonathan. He's actually the registrar of Act 36. He's the guy that registers all the plant pesticides, fertilizers, plant remedies, you name it. It's a very important person in all our lives. So yeah, I think we look forward to what everyone is going to say. There's three, I think, very pertinent issues affecting potato industry at the moment. Obviously, plant health and biosecurity. I think also the loss of older crop protection products is of concern for everybody. The new generation of products coming in. And then also water access and quality of water resources. So Monique will talk a bit to that as well. We're going to do a bit different format than this morning because some of the speakers have requested to actually give a presentation as well because of the nature of the subjects. So we're going to start off with Maanda from DALRRD. You'll be the first speaker. Maanda, so maybe if you can go up to the podium and start taking us through. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Les, for this opportunity to give the legislative perspective on plant biosecurity and what we anticipate in the future. So I will just give you an overview about the plant health legislative framework. I don't have much time. You can see the number of panelists who are set there, so each of them still need time. So I'll just run through it, and it's about the plant health legislation and its regulations, and I think members and growers will appreciate the importance of regulations and plant health legislation in the country, because this is there just to, for the sustainability and benefit of the country in terms of going forward. So first of all, I want to just indicate that as a country, firstly, we need to comply with the international prescripts. So government has got obligation to make sure that we do comply with the World Trade Organization and the international prescript, which is International Plant Protection Convention. so that we're able to participate in the international trade, because if the country do not follow those rules, it's a challenge in terms of entering into new market and participating into trade on the basis of controlling pests and diseases. And of course, we also apply the principle of scientific principle, and our measures are science-based and informed by the research, new findings, and inputs from the industry. And with that, we adopt that international instrument to make our national law, to make sure that our national law is also in line with the international framework, which is important in terms of plant health. So currently, you can just look at that, and the current legislation that the country is only, applying for the control of pests and diseases in South Africa. This act was promulgated long time, 1983. You can see this is very old, and this act only currently provide for import, what comes in, and what we deal with in terms of the domestic perspective. But I just want to also share with the members here that we will be revising in future the Emergency Plant Pest Response Plan. It's a tool that South Africa will be implementing going forward in response of new outbreak of diseases, so that we're able to deal with this quicker to prevent further spread. So we will also be informing relevant committee and the growers so that they participate through that journey of bringing that tool. So furthermore, why biosecurity is important, and of course you will understand that the country is also concerned of what is coming into the country, because what is imported, plants and plant products, has got a risk of pests and diseases introduction. Therefore, ours is just to look at the safeguarding and protecting our country from exotic pests and diseases, such as all those pathogens that are just coming in, and also some viruses. So we do have some import conditions and requirements which are always informed by science and the growers, so that they are also scientifically justified. So this is very important to have rules and legislation in a country on the basis of plant health biosecurity, because if the country doesn't have such measures, imagine the country without biosecurity measures. So the sector can just collapse with no time. Therefore, it is important, because I understand most of you also trade your potatoes, exporting to our neighboring country, and you will understand that one time we have notified the occurrence of peppering spot in the country, and all our neighboring country just reacted, to say we can no longer bring our produce to their area. So it is important that we appreciate this measure, because indeed they are also, enable the country to participate in safe and fair trade. And also in terms of market access, we know those that are existing, we're able to maintain them through this biosecurity, and we hope that going forward with this sector, we'll get more markets on the basis of us being able to monitor pests and diseases and able to maintain and control them, so that we're able to trade with our trading partner. Because of course our trading partner may not take our produce if certain pests of economic importance is occurring in the country. But ours is just to make sure that we advance pests and diseases control at a national level, because we appreciate the contribution of the sector towards food production and food security, and also economic growth and development, as well as job creation in the value chain of potato production. So the good news is that that act that I've just indicated, Agricultural Pest Act 1983, we are in the process of repealing that act, and we are happy to announce that this sector soon, under this administration, we might have a new legislation, because that legislation was processed and consulted, and it was sent to the president in the previous administration in May. I'm sure they are considering it so that it can be assented, so that it can be a law. What now? We need also the contribution of the sector going forward, We don't want to be government that makes law. We want government that seek ideas and proposal to make law. What I'm saying is that we are going to develop new regulations, domestic control of diseases, import control and export control. And ours is just to say, we are going to put it to you so that we are able to come with proposal. How do you want to see the new regime in terms of regulations so that you can be able to participate? So that law is, at an advanced stage. And of course, national control of pests and diseases remain a critical importance for government to make sure that we apply quarantine measures in any infested area to make sure that you do not move any infested material from infested area to pest-free area. We do that just to prohibit or restrict the movement thereof so that other growers are not affected just by one individual. So these measures are not punishment. Quarantine measures are there just to assist growers so that we can have a sustainable sector. And it is important to indicate that yesterday one speaker said we have got a working certification scheme in South Africa, and that I can confirm. We have got an open door policies, but we aim for better engagement going forward with the potato certification scheme and the potato South Africa so that they contribute in shaping and redirecting how the sector should look like. Just critical, please, growers, use of land, please, researchers, universities, we require you to assist us. Government cannot be everywhere. So I'm sure after this forum, wherever you will be, you will start taking this level of reporting of any suspicion of any diseases. So any symptoms that you see that you don't know what it is, you are required in terms of this law that you report to us. After having reporting, we are able to come out and collect official sample so that we can validate. And it is more critical because we want to expand our surveillance system, and we also want to enter into technology application in terms of using drones and also making sure that scouting it's also technologically informed, and we do it accordingly. And also we can even see in the farms the damage caused by certain insects and pests, and that will assist a great deal. So I must indicate that surveillance is going to be intensified to assist the sector going forward. We will need more companies who are also dealing with the technology to make sure that they input into this process. This is just a quarantine slide that I just don't want to emphasize more on that. And import, please, our borders, yes, one can say they are porous because it appears as if we've got new or many outbreak of diseases, but I want to indicate that they are not porous. We've got measures in place to make sure that anything that comes into the country, it goes through checks and balances. And now we've got a border management agencies that is working very closely with the department to make sure that whatever that comes into South Africa, it complies with the requirements thereof, and also to make sure that there are no diseases from other countries, just to make sure that we protect the agricultural sector as a whole. And we as government, we have invested a lot in terms of research area, and those research are ongoing on surveillance and diagnostic. And also we want to indicate that we need more diagnostic network. So government doesn't want to work alone. So we want to bring all these diagnostic services from private sector and so on, so that they can be accredited to allow us also to recognize the results as authentic. So we are saying in future the sector should also collaborate better with us to make sure that we've got a strong diagnostic network. So you might know that the diseases with peppering spot is a new disease for the country, but there's more research that is ongoing. So we appreciated the request that we got from Potato SA to deregulate the pest, but we have responded so far to say it may not be prudent to deregulate it because it has got trade implication, and let's allow more research to be conducted in terms of hosts and distribution and nematodes. But the measures that we're going to put now, they are going to be less strict, and so that there is no total loss against the grower. So I think it was alluded to yesterday, but it is important to mention that. Last slide. In the future, what do we have for the future? We're going to have a new legislation that the sector will be regulated, continuous better coordination and working relation with the industry from the platform that we've already created with regard to the regulated pest committee. And I also sit, the department also sit in the council forum, so that we provide some guidance and input. It's also important, South Africa has established a national hub, biosecurity hub. In that hub, we need everything to be digitalized. We need to centralize the data with regard to surveillance, and that is important. And I think partners who are here, they can play a significant role in terms of making sure that we understand how many experts do we have in terms of pests and diseases affecting potato industry, so that we don't run around looking for the experts. So we have a hub where information is centralized to assist the country. Surveillance data will be centralized. So that is ongoing, and we are about to engage more with relevant structure within the sector, the potato certification scheme, as well as other members as well, and the research council. So I think it is important also to indicate that we need to be, this sector must be sustainable, and we as government, we are here to assist in terms of negotiating opportunity in terms of new markets within the SADC region and Africa. So we're able to do that through bilateral engagement. And it is not possible, but one would wish that this country is free from diseases of economic importance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maanda. I think before you go, are there any questions, immediate questions for Maanda that you want him to maybe answer? And why I ask that is because, he's fresh in our minds. After we've taken 5 speakers, maybe you've forgotten what you want to ask him. I don't know if there is anything from the audience which you want to ask him about. This is the man to ask, if these measures, for example, like we found now when we found when PEP RSV is found, that they put the directives under the Agricultural Pests Act on that. So I don't know if there are any questions from the floor. I certainly have one if there is not any from the floor that I want to ask, but I don't know. Please, is there anything from Maanda for now? If not, Maanda, there's one question I want to ask, and that is the way the Act has been applied in the past, especially with regards to regulated pests. If it was found and the directive was given that the whole crop is destroyed, needless to say, that's got a massive impact on that particular farmer, on his crop. A financial impact. It's also got an impact in terms, for example, in terms of food security. If you're talking about, say, seed potatoes. So there's a roll-on effect there as well. Has there been any change in the thinking from the department on how to deal with these things? I know it's not an easy answer, and I may be putting you on the spot, going forward. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I think, thank you very much, Les. I think it is important to raise that question because we do understand the consequences that will happen after imposing quarantine measures, such as distracting or destroying the commodity that is infested. Mm-hmm. But the fundamental purpose of the Act is to prevent further spread. That is indeed one of the measures that can be taken to make sure that we curb the spread of the pest. But on the same light, remember we don't want to be in the position whereby, we did not implement certain measure and the pest spread all over and affect the sector as a whole. But, so we consider all these economic losses, issues and the input that you put in your operation. And of course, this new law will also we've got a compensation clause which need to be looked at as well to make sure that growers affected can apply. But it is the discretion of the minister to take such decision so that after evaluation and due diligence, compensation may be applicable. So you see, these are just quarantine measures. That's how they are designed for, to make sure that the spread of these organisms doesn't affect your neighbor or everyone in the sector, because there are very important trade implications in this. But it's our duty to make sure that we make proper awareness to our stakeholders. So, but the new law, it's more of efficiency and improvement and effectiveness to assist the sector. And if the sector is assisted, it means there's sustainability in the value chain and the production and food security as a whole. And the country can participate in the export market. Because what we're dealing with the diseases of economic importance, diseases of quarantine importance, which we call them regulated pests. And it is our duty in terms of international prescriptions to make sure that we adhere to that. What we're asking from that law is to make sure that growers comply with the provision thereof. It is not a punishment, but it's just to make sure that the sector operation has got some guidelines and regulations which we need to observe. Thank you.
Thank you, Maanda. Thank you very much. Okay, you can come and sit. Thank you for now. Yeah, sorry, there's another question. Oh, apologies, I can't see with a lot.
Sorry, thank you, Willie Jacobs from Potato South Africa. We have seen but not met, I reckon. I just wanted to make sure about the ability to cover farmers in a proper way. I understand that you said that it's at the discretion of the minister to make a decision in terms of, recovering the cost. But I think that's probably the biggest fear in the farming environment, is to actually report something and then run the loss. And I don't want to ask for a solution now. I'm just putting it out there that maybe we should work towards a point where there's actually a proper fund that's properly structured with clear criteria to which there can be claims put, so that we can be in a position where farmers find better comfort in terms of reporting that. You don't want to we cannot take a financial loss on day one in the farming industry anymore. There's no space for that.
Yeah. Thank you for those words, Willie. Much appreciated.
Yeah, those are to be considered.
There's another question there. Comment?
Dr. Maanda, Abram Vermeulen, thanks for a very insightful presentation. We heard yesterday 2050 is now, and we heard about the importance of gene editing. Maybe just a little bit of what government stance on gene editing.
Thank you for that question. Maanda, do you want to answer now?
Yeah, the gene editing one, I think it's a very relevant question, but I think I'm not sure if Jonathan will touch on it in his talk. But it may be important because it may be also under his jurisdiction as well. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, I don't know, do you want to
Well,
put you on a hot spot here?
No, I don't want to. I think that matter, we all know that there is a discussions about it. South Africa seems to have a different position whether that technology should be included as part of the GMO. While probably industry do not agree. So my understanding is that those discussions are not going, and I can only then perhaps inform the people here to continue those engagements so that government and the industry can have the same position on this technology that currently there are no agreement. I think, as Maanda has been saying here throughout his presentation, is that government works with industry. And as such, industry must continue to engage with government on that area of the technology. I think that's what I could only say for now.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Jonathan. I think if there's no more questions for the moment, maybe you can just carry on speaking, because you're the next speaker. Government is in the hot seat at the moment. So, so talk a bit about your perspectives. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for being invited here. So usually we don't get the invitation to come and engage with one of the key stakeholders. As pesticide regulators, we are supposed to engage with you. So thank you very much for inviting us. Also, just to appreciate the work the industry does, that is to feed this country. So we know that to be able to continue the work that you do, you need pesticides to be able to manage the pests and the disease that you faced in your farms. Maanda has spoken about the issue of biosecurity. To be able to control any outbreak of disease, any viral diseases that you can have an outbreak, you need pesticides. At the same time, South African society is joining the world in demanding confidence that the use of pesticides in this country is safe. So this country is joining the rest of the world where the demand is that the use of pesticides is safe. And that is where ourselves as regulators, together with my colleagues here on the right and you, come in. That to be able to continue to protect this technology, which is important, we need to make sure that these pesticides are used correctly. Otherwise, pressure will continue to be put to the regulators to make certain decisions. So you are aware that last year we published the regulations that begin to identify certain pesticides of risk that need to be phased out. Of course, that decision have to take into consideration if there are alternatives to deal with pests and the disease that you may face in your farm. So the big word there is that the country is joining the world in phasing out highly hazardous chemicals. So there is a global decision to phase out highly hazardous chemicals, and in this country, we now have started with certain targeted groups. Of course, like I said, the final decision when it comes to a specific product, it will have to be based on whether there are alternatives to replace the chemicals that we have identified. So that's the key word, so that when we leave here tonight, we should know that there are certain chemicals that we are going to prohibit. However, if there are no alternatives, the regulation that we publish provide for derogation measures. so that we can agree as to how and chemicals that fall within a particular group, we can continue to use them under specific conditions. So that is what is key. Now, the colleagues that are sitting on my right need certainty. They need to know if they are putting an investment to bring a chemical in this country, they need rules. They need criteria as to how we are going to evaluate the product, and that is where the need for the regulation comes in. In other words, we regulate because those who bring the technology want certainty. They want to know how their investment will be protected, and that's why they need the legislation. So legislation, indeed, it is here to make sure that you can continue to farm as farmers, at the same time to protect the society from pesticides. But we also need to protect the investment of the people that want to supply and sell product in this country. They make a lot of investment, and that investment needs to be protected, so it gets protected through the legislation that regulates pesticides. Now, for you as farmers to derive the full benefit of what this technology offers, we need to regulate the sales, of course. We need to regulate how you use the technology, because the technology you can only derive the benefit if you know how you are going to use the technology. So that's why we regulate the use in terms of the labels that get approved together with the product that get approved. Now, that is where, as farmers, you play the role. That given the pressure that the society have in getting rid of the tools that you rely on, we require your cooperation in making sure that you, together with the farm workers, use the product properly. Because if you don't do that, the pressure that is being demanded by the society will keep on growing. You probably heard yesterday, the minister have announced that the current framework that we have that regulate pesticides, amongst other issues, need to be modernized. And that modernization is going to talk to certain key important issues that relate to the safe use of the products. So as the sector sitting here that normally do not engage on the framing of the framework that is going to govern how you are going to use pesticides in the future, with the announcement that has been made yesterday, I will really want to call you so that you can shape the new framework that will be governing how pesticides are going to be governed in the future. So probably that framework should be ready for consultations, probably somewhere by, I can't give specific time frames, but it should be ready for consultation before the end of this financial year. So that is the commitment that the new minister has made. And as such, I would therefore be inviting Potato SA to be part of the new, or to be part of the stakeholders that will be shaping how pesticides in these countries are going to be governed going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the registrar, for Jonathan? There at the back, I see. Sorry, the lights are a bit in my eyes. At the back, there's a question.
Jonathan, Abram here again. Can you just share a little bit on the biological regulatory framework? Is that well governed? And similar to the topic of yesterday, do you see an increase in terms of registration submissions in the biological space? I promise my last question.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Okay, so if you go back, I arrived to the department, I think 2003, 2004 until 2007-8. If you look at the biological products in this country, they used to have a name, snake oil, something like that. Most of you never trusted this technology. Ourselves, together with the industry sitting on my right here, we have to work very hard to put frameworks as to how we are going to govern the regulation of biological products. And I think you can also confirm here that in the last 10 years, the biological products are one of the tools that are important for you to be able to farm. And that is where I was referring to the need for the regulation. Because once the regulation is in place, those that have money want to invest in the technology will then put money in place to make sure that the correct products, as you are aware now, can be sold. Now, biological products are not going to replace synthetic chemicals. We, in South Africa, our position is that both these tools are important and they will continue to work with each other rather than replacing each other. Yes, there was a time when there has been a lot of increase for biological products, but I don't think there will be a huge increase of the volumes of the biological products that we have been receiving in the last 10 years.
Thank you for that answer. Okay, thank you, Jonathan. I think you're off the hook for now for a few minutes. Another question.
Jonathan, yeah, we know Act is law and stuff like that, but we know also staff is sometimes an issue. Your department, how do you find it? Is there perhaps something that we can do from industry to do something to help you? Because sometimes it does take a long time to get something through to registry, doing all the registration trials and stuff, but it still does take a lot of time. Is there something that we can do to help you?
Well, the registrar can only make decisions when correct supporting information is provided. Now, as a country, we have a big challenge on the technical aspect of putting together a dossier. So that's one challenge. Where as an industry, given the fact that not much research work is now being done in this country, there is capacity issue at a country level in terms of getting the capacity of technical people who can put together a correct dossier. Of course, we also then source the very same resources from the countries that have such limited capacity. So we do have limitation in terms of moving with speed. So usually we will request, we call them external technical advisors, where we go out there and request if people could assist us with dossier evaluations. And I can tell you that the country do not have this capacity. So as an industry, if we go out, look for experts that could assist us in evaluating dossiers, we would be happy if you could put forward certain names of people that we can rely on.
Thank you for that answer. I think we, in the interest of time, we can have questions again at the end, of course, but we give each of the speakers a chance. Rod, I think you next up, if you
Thanks,
don't
Liz.
mind.
Appreciate it. So for those of you who don't know, CropLife is a not-for-profit industry association, and we represent the manufacturers, suppliers, and distributors of plant protection solutions in South Africa. When Vili and my brain has gone totally crazy, you know what your name is. When we were approached to have a chat and we said, talk about 2050 and what is the plant protection solution industry for potatoes going to look like, we had to sit down and we had to think there's lots of things that are happening today that are going to impact farmers between now and 2050. And a lot of that is legislation that Jonathan has just mentioned, but also mentioned by Jonathan and yesterday during the ABSA presentation, is society's demand on us is certainly going to change. We're a little bit more forceful in what we say than Jonathan says. We are seeing a rise in activism against organized agriculture, whether it's land tenure, people not using PPE on farms, or against pesticides themselves. So the overall plant protection solution industry and farmers, we need to start doing things differently today so that we are still relevant and we have a sustainable industry by 2015. We 100% support regulation. Regulation is important to protect many different people, particularly farmers. A farmer needs to know that the plant protection solution he's buying and using has been tested in some way. It is going to do what the label says it will do, and you have some warm feeling that the product is at a quality level that you accept. The product also needs to have no risk for the environment, the users, and let's not forget the consumers when it comes to the residues of these plant protection solutions. So as far as we're concerned, we 100% support regulation. When it comes back to the question of Abraham about new technologies coming into South Africa, yes, industry is working with the regulators to help draw up guidelines for new technologies. This is important. If you gave me a dossier to analyze a new biological product, I would be useless. I've had no experience there. So we do need to make sure that when new technologies come into our country, the concurrent education comes along with it. And we do need to embrace IPM. We cannot stay on synthetic chemicals forever. As Jonathan says, however, new technologies, biologicals, semiochemicals, they all absolutely are complementary to the products we have today. So the message that we want to bring is for us all to still be relevant and sustainable to wider society by 2050, we all need to start complying. Everybody knows about Act 36 of 1947, for sure. That's our right to operate in this country. It's the right for a farmer to use a product that has been registered and used. But there are multiple other bits of legislation that as the agricultural industry, from the manufacturers all the way through suppliers, distributors, and the farmer need to make sure we're complying with so that we are not giving the naysayers and the activists more ammunition to attack our industry. Some of those areas I'm talking about is extended producer responsibility. We are now legislation in our country, any packaging that you have, you cannot bury it, you cannot burn it, it needs to be collected, sent off for recycling so that we have a circular economy. That's the law. It's not a CropLife law, it's not a Jonathan law, it's the law of our country. We have various legislation relating to the global harmonized system of classification and labeling of any chemical, not just plant protection solutions. And along with that legislation comes a responsibility for all of us, again, from a manufacturer all the way down to the farmer. Whoever is exposed to the use of that chemical needs to know the hazards associated with handling it, applying it, or eventually what it's going to do on a crop. So it sounds a bit daunting, all of this legislation, but I urge us all that we need to start complying today if we want to have a relevant and sustainable industry going forward. And before you all jump up and down and say it's all doom and gloom, the regulation that Jonathan's department issued in August of last year, yes, it's putting some restrictions on highly hazardous products or substances of concern. Yes, we are going to have products phased out. But at the same time, there is now provision in there. As the registrar said, he now has the legal right to grant some derogations, temporary derogations, for specific crop pest combinations where grower associations such as Potatoes SA has indicated they cannot survive without that plant protection solution. But it also gives provision for the registrar to fast track the registration of so-called low-risk products. That can either be of a chemical nature or a biological, semiochemical type product. So the Act, while it is taking away some of our older tools, it is certainly giving us the ability to bring new technologies to the market faster. So please don't think it's all doom and gloom. Les, I think I will leave it there and we'll see if there's any questions.
Yeah, any questions for Rod at this point? There's a question there in the audience.
Okay, thank you. I'm Meshach, a farmer in Canadian Coxstead. I'm interested in this nice law that these containers must not be discarded anyhow. They need to be actually returned. We end up with piles of containers. You would know potatoes is one of the crops that will make you have a lot of containers of chemicals, especially if you're planting more than 50 hectares, you use a lot of chemicals weekly. So is there any incentive maybe that will motivate these people who are, I would say, the reps of these companies who are selling the containers to drive back and come and collect these containers so that they can be discarded in the right way or they can be recycled? Is there any incentive for them and for the farmer as well to be motivated to keep these containers as well? Thank you.
I'm off. No, I'm back. So Meshach, yes, the extended producer responsibility legislation in our country demands one of two things. One, the originator of the packaging, whether it's a pesticide container or a light bulb or a cardboard box, needs to either set up their own system for the collection and recycling of that packaging or become part of an industry-led one. So CropLife South Africa has set up a product responsible organization. It's a not-for-profit that is driving the knowledge transfer and establishing collection points around the country for the collection of empty pesticide containers. We like to say people should do the right thing because it's good for the environment, it's good for their own families and their immediate farming situation. We would love people to do it because it's the right thing to do. We don't really want people only to do it because there's a big stick of the law that green scorpions can come along and get hold of you. So first step, on the CropLife South Africa website, there's a container management button. It lists all the existing collectors of empty pesticide containers. If there's one nearby to you, you give them a ring, they will come and pick it up. If there is nobody nearby to you, drop us an email and we will add it on as a priority onto the list of priority areas where we need to find partners. In terms of incentives, we are not wanting our farmers to be paid for the empty container. We're rather working with previously disadvantaged groups who can actually make a living out of collecting the packaging because they collect it on farms, they assimilate it in central areas, and then they pass it on to the major recyclers. And they do get a few cents for every kg of plastic. So majority of our plant protection solutions are in HDPE, and there's currently a huge demand from the recyclers in our country for HDPE. All our request is that all farmers, please go have a look on the CropLife South Africa website. You have to triple rinse your container before you send it back for recycling. Triple rinsing it, not only does it allow you to make sure you're not leaving any product left in the container, saving you some money, put it into your spray tank, but if the product is triple rinsed, it can be transported as normal waste. If you do not triple rinse it, it is considered as hazardous waste in this country, and you're not allowed to chuck it on your bucky and drive it anyway. But please, that's a subject all on its own. Get hold of me afterwards or have a look at the website. There's a specific section on container management. Thanks, Mishak.
Thank you, Rod. I think that's enlightening for me as well. Thank you for that. Good work. Any more questions for Rod? Not for the moment. Okay, thank you. David, you're on.
Thank you. I'm not so sure which microphone I'm speaking to. It seems like it's a small one. So guys, yeah, I'd like to send an apology on behalf of Vanessa. She really would have liked to be here to present to you. She's incredibly passionate when it comes to biologicals, biostimulants. It's been a life mission of her, and with 19 years of experience in the industry, specifically relating to biostimulants, I think no one would be better to be able to present on this. So in the future, I'm sure that she should be someone that you do consider to come back onto the stage so that you can share that expertise, that knowledge with you. I'm going to start just setting the scene in terms of what are the challenges. I think we're all very familiar with this. We heard earlier a little bit about crop potentials and nutrient use potentials that we're actually being able to achieve in the field. But if we have a look at the genetic potential of the potato crop, we're sitting at somewhere around 160 tons per hectare. And if we think of the typical yields that we're getting, and I'm not talking about the top farmers are sitting at around that 60 to 70% of the potential. But on average, we're sitting around 30 to 40% of that potential. And there's limitations from the amount of radiation present in certain areas to nutrient deficiencies, environmental constraints, pest and disease pressures. And what we need to look at is enabling the synergistic effects of integrated management practices, combining biologicals with synthetic chemicals, with on-farm conservation practices that enable us to have a more, let's say, healthy plant at the end of the day that's able to tolerate these adverse conditions and adverse climates. In terms of the outlook and the ongoing innovations that are happening within the space, it's incredibly big. And you're going to see in the next couple of slides, I'm going to give a brief overview from a global context as well, so that you can see what's coming. Because these things, as you know, take time. It takes a few years because of the legislation that we have locally in order to actually come into the country. They need to be vetted. And it also sets the scene as to why it's so important for us to have this legislation. This legislation is also here to protect us. As much as sometimes we might be frustrated that it takes a little bit of time, that we have got certain capacities when it comes to the resources to quickly attend to these registration applications, it's really important that we partner together as industry with governments to ensure that that legislation is there to protect us, but also to ensure that the best solutions are coming to our country for our farmers that align with both human safety, environmental safety, and proven efficacy. If we have a look at the different categories, there's inoculants, there's biofertilizers, biopesticides, biostimulants, and others, including viruses that are being developed, different enzymes. It's incredibly extensive. And as Jonathan alluded to, there's a multitude of bathtub brews, snake oils that are still present in industry and are present in industry globally. And it makes it even more important that as industry, we also vet these things. It's important from a supplier's perspective that we ensure the processes that we undertake from an R&D perspective ensure that we're getting consistent results when it comes to these products. And efficacy is only good if we also get a return on investment. So the price points need to be aligned to the price expenditure from farmers. This is a biologicals landscape that was distributed or first published at last year's Biological Summit. And what it shows you is 400 different companies that are playing within this field. 400 of a total of 1,200 that were identified to play in some realm within the biological sphere. And you can see there's a combination from plant health enhancements to biocontrol. Companies that are present are only present once, even though they do represent themselves in more than one categories in majority of the cases. In 2/3 of the cases, we have both plant health and plant protection. Sorry, in 1/3 of the cases, it's plant health and plant protection. But in 2/3 of the case, it's either plant health or plant protection. So it's a huge number of companies, and already, if you look at all of these companies, you can imagine with 1,200 companies, how many new products are there? How many times will a new salesman come to your farm and tell you that you can get a 5% yield increase if you apply this product? And if we apply 1,200 new products, what is our yield going to be? Something very interesting is to have a look at what's happening at a large agricultural landscape. You're seeing the acquisition of a lot of those 1,200 companies with a huge amount of investments by some of the big agricultural companies globally. There would not be this amount of investment if there's not justification behind the importance for future sustainability to provide food for the growing nation. If you have a look at some of the figures there, it's quite incredible. But what's most important is have a look at that continual annual growth rate. We're projected globally to have a continual annual growth rate of around 13 to 14%, somewhere between them. It differs according to reports. But we have lots of companies that are projecting 17% continual annual growth rates. The fertilizer industry is projecting to grow at roughly 3% year on year. If we have a look at crop chemicals, single digits. And the biocontrol side of things is expected by the year 2035 to contribute towards as much as 25% of our crop protection programs. So it's a responsibility of all of us, industry as well as farmers, to start utilizing, trialing, getting more comfortable with these solutions and how you can implement them into your management practices. One of the main reasons they have a reputation as a snake oil is because of the incorrect application when it comes to practically incorporating it into a program. Compatibility issues in the tank mix, incorrect timing from environmental conditions. There can also be problems from the supplier level, shelf life issues. What we need to do is start having a look at very specific solutions for very specific problems or physiological processes or control measures that we need to try and mitigate. And an integrated approach is the only way that we can do that. And there's very limited opportunities for us to come into certain crop programs to be able to deliver biostimulants. There's multitudes of research internationally and locally that showcase the increases in nutrient use efficiency, the increases of water use efficiency. We've heard this in previous sessions, how important it is, especially when it comes to ensuring food production and food security for the country. But how many of us are really looking at managing our crops from a physiological level, from a genetic level, from a crop chemical level, and from a biostimulant level? Do we have a good enough understanding of what biostimulant to apply at what time, or are we just broadly applying the same biostimulant at multiple times in a crop cycle? There's a lot of in-depth research going into the actual metabolite interactions of biostimulants on gene upregulation, on enzyme upregulation, and the net effect that that has on steering physiological processes. What we need to do is have more education, and that comes from both a private sector and an industry sector, to ensure that knowledge is being disseminated to the farmers, but also disseminated to the retailers who are going to be delivering these products to you in the field. Some interesting stats, and this is a survey conducted in North America. 1,029 farmers were interviewed, specifically having a look at their attitudes towards the incorporation of biologicals, whether it be biocontrol or biostimulants. And you can see that there's roughly a 39% that can be considered to be positive. And while some people are curious and they're open to trying these products, there's still a very small percentage that are actually utilizing this within their programs. This is the area that we need to work on. If we're wanting to look towards 2050, towards ensuring our sustainability, we need to start vetting these different biostimulants, these different biocontrol agents, so that we have a better understanding of how they can be incorporated into a program and how they're going to deliver positive returns for us. If you take it to a global context, it's a much more dismal picture. We've got the early adopter countries like Brazil, who have more than 50% of their growers. Again, more than 1,000 growers in Brazil were surveyed, and in total the survey was comprised of 5,500 growers across the globe. But globally, we're sitting at roughly 20% that are either introducing it in their programs or are willing to introduce it in their program. This means there's an incredible amount of scope for us to grow this industry. And just a few key take-home messages. I know it's a bit early for that, but I'll get them out the way. The one thing I want to reiterate, and Jonathan mentioned it, Rod mentioned it as well, biologicals are not direct replacements for synthetic chemicals. They can be utilized synergistically to have a compounding beneficial effect if utilized at the right time and if utilized for the right reason. The immediate opportunities are integrating biologicals in your current management practices to benefit from these synergies. And I do encourage you, work together as farmers, as study groups within different regions to start testing what works. There are different constraints when you have a look at microclimates and macroclimates of different areas, different soil contextual types. And one of the biggest problems that we often have is, unfortunately, the marketing claims behind a lot of these products that are not backed by good data. Ensure that if a biological comes to you, that there is data to back it up. Ensure that the person who is selling it to you has a good understanding of how to utilize it, or you have a good understanding of how to utilize it. And most importantly, when it will work and when it won't work. I think the success rate also varies, and we need to understand that it's a living organism exposed to completely different environmental conditions, even when applied to the same land on the same crop, just across a different year. And those different conditions can result in whether we see efficacy or not. And often this adds to the illusion of the snake oils, unfortunately for the industry. But I think my overall message is we know that there's a growing awareness towards biostimulants. There's a lot of excitement, as there should be. There are a lot of incredible new developments, technologies, being able to improve the shelf life, improve the ability and the efficiencies of these biological products to be able to undertake increasing systemic acquired resistance of plants so that we have an extended period of efficacy of our crop chemistries. But there's certainly a gap that exists when it comes to the knowledge transfer, the actual understanding of how this works. And I think this is going to be the biggest challenge that we need to overcome together, both as industry and as farmers, increasing our knowledge on how to use them, when to use them. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any questions for David? We've got not too much. We've got a bit of time constraints, but there's a few. If you're welcome to ask him questions for David. If not, David, I mean, maybe quickly, Monique, before I give you a chance, for David, to you, do you just looking at the picture you showed of all these companies involved? Do you think it's going to be sort of, and I think in a sense we are takers in this country. In other words, we're not drivers. But the impact thereof is inevitable. In other words, we need to give attention to biologicals. We need to get into that, mindset. Because otherwise, at the end of the day, let's call it, even if allowed for, these other type of products won't be available anymore and won't be used anywhere else. So we won't have a choice. Is that a correct sort of assumption or not?
Definitely. I think it's incredibly valid. If you consider the fact that we're going to be growing at double-digit figures, it's not just those companies that are present that are going to be role players. There's going to be more people that come in. So if we aren't invested in trying to determine the efficacy ourselves at a more local, granular level, there's just going to be an abundance of products. And again, you don't know where to turn because it's too confusing. Who do you trust? Who do you not trust? It's important to partner with reputable companies, but also to utilize industries such as SA Potato to ensure that we do the right thing.
Yeah. Question.
Thank you, David, for a good presentation. Just in your view, a country like Brazil, embracing the biologicals, what is the reason, according to your knowledge, why, is Brazil, they're part of the BRICS countries, there's also a third world country, but why is a country like Brazil embrace the biologicals so quickly versus other countries like South Africa or even countries like Europe?
I think it's a valid question, and if you actually look back, it hasn't been a quick adoption. Brazil have been the market leaders when it comes to biologicals, and they've been backed by an incredibly strong research arm and research team that's been looking into this. So a lot of the biologicals that we have present in South Africa even come from a Brazilian context. When you have a look at those percentages, they can be slightly skewed because you've got to take into consideration the crop acreages that they have there and how important crops like soybean that utilize inoculants are. So I think that they're a bit ahead of us because they've been exposed to it for a lot longer. They have a lot of reputable science to back up the data on farm, and they've got a lot of partnerships where companies are working together with the farmers. It's a very client-centric approach that they have that enables that dissemination of information, that knowledge sharing, the education on how to use a biological that actually enables it to be used correctly.
Yeah, thank you. David, any more questions for David? Yeah? In the corner here.
I hear what you say about the field trials that are needed, and because of the way biologicals work, it is so specific to the microclimates. But that sounds to me like a lot of capacity is needed to be able to implement these field trials across the country, the different crops, the different products within those microclimates. Does the industry have the capacity to be able to implement all of those field trials to actually get the uptake of biologicals in South Africa in a timely manner to beat, to beat the clock against the synthetics that are going out of the market?
I think the timely manner is the difficult part of that question, because what time period are we talking about? As far as capacity goes, I don't think we currently have it, and that's why I'm reaching out to the farmers to say, guys, please be involved, run trials on your own farm. Unlike typical synthetic chemicals, you don't apply the product and immediately see the effect of the product. Sometimes you've got to wait until the yield comes before we're actually able to measure whether or not we had a positive effect. And that's the difficulties when it comes to biologicals. I've been undertaking field trials for the past 10 years, and no one can tell me about the difficulties when it comes to actually trying to do good scientific trials at a field level at scale. It's incredibly difficult because there's a number of different factors that can affect it, whether you have the potential variances within field. So if you don't have a correct layout, and the majority of the trials that are done, often in the field, are simply a demo trial, one plot versus another plot. And unfortunately, there can be underlying issues relating to the one side that negatively affects the outcome of that specific trial, either positively or negative. I've had statistical trial layouts that will demonstrate more than a ton yield difference across the exact same treatment group, across 10 different repetitions within a single field. So if we're only applying a biological treatment across one planting swath or one spray boom swath, what is the likelihood of us actually getting credible data? So I think it takes a lot of effort. We need to be patient with it, but we need to rather ensure that we're doing quality research and not just trying to get information for the sake of information.
Yeah. Thank you. Good answer. Thanks for that. Monique, we've got a few minutes left. I'd like to hear from you from a farmer perspective. And please, if you feel easier, more comfortable, talking Afrikaans, I think that's perfectly fine as well. You're a farmer, and I mean, as we've heard at the beginning, we've all got different accents also, so please.
Thank you, Les. Yes, if you want to hear the Sandveld English accent, this is it. I think we knew we had a complicated topic, but that is rarig 'n tyd tof hierdie. I don't want to burst anyone's bubble. I think us as farmers we are used to adapt or die. So we will adapt, but with that adapt, the cost of producing potatoes, I think everyone knows, every farmer here knows the cost. So when we implement biologicals, something always works when you do it in 2 rows. But when you do the whole pivot, that's where the problem comes. So in 2 rows, everything works. But if you spend the money to do the whole pivot, then it doesn't work. So I think there's a fear to change from something that you know work and keep the pests under control to something you have to guess, you have to try. And I don't think anybody or any farmer has the funds to make mistakes. And earlier we talked about putting food on the table. So there's a lot of things we have to keep in mind. We have to, in the one side, and in our area we have the, how do I call them, the activists. For some reason they think farmers are people that mine the earth. And that's not true. That is simply not true. I think every farmer has a love for nature. That is why they do what they do. No farmer wants to see his children not being able to farm on the family farm, for instance. I'm not a 4th or 5th generation farmer. My father bought his farm when he was 50 years old. So we are still new in it and we know what it takes to get there. So farmers are people who think things through. They have to make difficult decisions every day. So we will need help from the chemical companies and from the industry. But I see the solution is coming from front because Piet and Martin were taking photos when you were talking. So I think we have the solution coming.
Thanks, Monique. I think, from my perspective, it seems like it's been a really quite an interesting discussion so far for me, and I want to see what I'm seeing. As I think, if you look at it firstly from government's perspective, I think there's a willingness and realization that at the end of the day, if you look at it from the regulation side, that it's more and more, I don't want to say a partnership, but it's more and more very important for government to take into consideration what the industry wants and what works for industry. So that's one partnership, let's call it a partnership, that for me is actually quite encouraging going into the future. And I think that's going to develop more and more, and I think that's excellent. That's very good. But on a secondary level, it seems like, and I think there's also almost like a plea from David to say we can't do it alone. We need the farmers to do this, to implement this, the biologicals. And I think there's also there, in other words, a big scope and a need for a partnership then between, let's call it a partnership between the farmers and the companies, the chemical biological companies, to develop these products and get those implemented. And then maybe thirdly, as an observation from my side, I think we need to realize that where we are in terms of resources, technical capacity and things like that. Certainly we need to try and build that up, but then also we really need to take note of what's happening in the rest of the world, because we have to either adopt or die at the end of the day. I think that's my sort of observation. I think, are there any further questions from the floor for our speakers? If not, I think I'm going to ask each of them, I see we've got about 5 minutes or so left, each of them to basically just give me, or summarize in one sentence what they think personally from their perspectives. What are the sort of most important things, the one most important thing going forward that should be taken into consideration? Maanda, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you very much. I think it is important that from the industry side and the growers, they should be the one to redirect how the legislative framework of government in plant protection should look like. So their contribution in that area will be highly appreciated at all times. So the participation is required. Legislation must not be made by government. It should be informed by members, and it should be feasible. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
I think for me, one of the most important things is we need to be collaborative. I think when it comes from the grower level, industry level, government, we all need to be collaborative. At the end of the day, the legislations are our legislations. They're there for us. They're meant to work for us. Yeah. If they're not working for us, we need to provide alternative solutions. And I think another take home is I'm definitely going to get Monique's number, and I look forward to converting you and showing you the light when it comes to biostimulants and biologicals.
Monique, from you?
Yes, don't get me wrong. I'm not against it. I only know there's a long road to be walked, and farmers can't walk it alone. So my message to the growers is it's our responsibility, and we usually take our responsibility to do what we have to do to ensure that our children still can farm in this land and be sustainable.
Yeah, thank you for that. Rob, putting you on the hot spot here.
Les, I first need to grovel for having a temporary brain freeze, is the polite word, and forgetting your name, Dirk. I'm a bit of a stuck record. For me, it is compliance. Not necessarily the farmers are seeing, unless you're having somebody marching on your farm, as Monique says, an activist. But the pressure on our industry as plant protection solutions providers is growing daily. It's really should not be underestimated. So please, let's do the right thing as an industry. Let's have responsible use of pesticides. Let's comply with everything. And as most of the other panelists have said, we've learned from the CMR phase-out process that collaboration between the industry association and the regulator, but also the other way, from the industry association to the grower associations, we need to hear from you what is going on out there. So let's have compliance and let's have collaboration. Thanks, Les.
Thanks, Rod. And last but of course not least, Jonathan?
Well, I think for me, if there is one sector that know how to work together, it's the agriculture sector. So let's continue with that. And if sometimes as government we forget you, make noise, we will listen to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's a question or a comment at the back.
Yes, it's such a privilege to have all of you on one stage. From industry side, what will you do to support the registration of biologicals? Because in terms of capacity, I'm actually the guys doing the field trials, so we do quite a lot of that work. The most challenging thing for me as a contract researcher is to get clear guidelines of each product's abilities and what the product do, how it function, in what segment it should be registered. So Jonathan, this time you are on the stage and I'm in the field, but thank you for helping me in advance. So from industry, if you can support us and help us, it will be quite nice to speed up the process to get your registrations through. So if you have ideas or things of workshops that we can do, I will be the first guy to attend.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I don't know who of us is going to answer that question.
Well, I can
Rod?
give some comments, Les.
Yes.
As I said earlier on, the new regulation already includes the ability, the legal ability for the registrar to fast track the registration of crop protection solutions that are of lower risk or of a biological in nature. That's already there. CropLife South Africa and SABO, the South African Biological Organization, we have an understanding whereby our working groups are engaging with the registrar and his team to get the guidelines for the registration of biologicals in place. You've seen from the other panelists, biologicals are hugely complicated. So the guidelines for all of those different sections is going to take time. And then the final point, the new regulation from August of last year also includes a section for the requirement of trials done under good experimental practice, GEP. Now, part of GEP is going to be a step-by-step protocol as to how you test the efficacy of a specific plant protection solution. So yes, we don't have all of those things in place yet for all the subsections of biologicals. It has been worked on by many different people in industry so that there's a clear set of criteria, what is needed in terms of efficacy or proof of safety to the environment, consumer, and the user. So give us a little bit of time. It's underway in conjunction with the Registrar's Office.
Thank you for that, Rod. I think that almost brings us to an end. Unfortunately, you know, as soon as you start digging down into these issues, we can probably spend all afternoon here. But thank you very much to the panel participants for your kindness of making yourselves available and for the very informative discussions. From my side, thank you very much also. Thank you.